Well, hello everybody. This is the 21st episode of Magnum Opi Podcast, and here we are with the Bloody Meridian, or the Evening Redness in the West. Hello, how is everybody?
Bloody Meridian is my favorite cocktail.
Oh, good.
Isn't it Bloody Mary?
No, that's
Ah,
that's something else. So yeah, I'm doing awesome. Still waiting to submit to the pandemic, but that's it. Nothing's happening much. How are you doing, Veldosh?
Yeah, not doing too bad. Finally got this book done with, so
Yeah, it was a bit of a slog,
hmm.
and that was a review, ladies and gentlemen. The end. Oh, okay, roll credits.
yeah, yeah, indeed, it was a very weird book.
So I don't. Yeah, I don't know why this book is praised so highly.
Yeah, we will come to that. I don't know either.
Right. So we read this book. So now we talk about it. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, indeed. On to the
Yes.
author. Well, Cormac McCarthy, he's, I think, one of the few authors still alive, despite the book we don't talk about. So, yeah, he's currently 88. He is descended from Irish Catholics, and he went to a Catholic high school, and he served in the US Air Force before starting his writing career, if I got that right.
So he's not related to that beetle, right?
Not I'm aware.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, this it's a bit of an odd figure. So apparently he spent a long time writing this book, even just putting it away for a long time, and then suddenly writing big spurts in one go. So
Mm,
yeah,
I
I
think.
don't I don't have anything to tell about Cormac McCarthy himself because it's the first book that I read of him. So
Hmm.
Haven't you watched No Country for Old Men? He wrote the book as well.
oh yeah,
Or
Yeah, I
I've
saw the
seen that.
movie. Yeah.
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Was some entertaining characters were in there. Was it Javier? What's his
yeah,
name? The guy with the kettle thing.
Hmm.
Javier Bardem. Yeah. So he was kind of this evil guy, this assassin that basically, well, no emotions, but he just came to people and then let them toss a coin, and if they lost, they would kill them. So and he had this strange way of killing them with using compressed air.
Well, it
Which
just sounds like another form of the Judge, just later.
yeah.
yeah, so just take the template, fill in a different town, a different vehicle, and have a different name, and you have a new book, right? That's
Hmm.
how
Indeed.
writers write. So
Okay. So you saw some parallels between No Country for Old Men and this book, as you described, just copy and
the,
paste, change settings.
well, it's not really copy and paste, but the No Country for Old Men is also a bit meandering in its storyline. So and you have this real, yeah, this character who comes to judge people, or although the gimmick is that he let them Tony Costa let chance decide whether they live or die instead of instead of doing it uh, just willy nilly. The difference is though that the devil in this book is really well spoken and well educated.
Hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
he could have been a university teacher or a writer himself, which might be a hint to what kind of person McCarthy is.
Mm-hmm.
And because they always say that the writer puts himself in the book in some character or another. It isn't a coincidence that almost every Stephen King book involves a writer as a hero. So
Hmm. Yeah.
that's I mean,
Also, with like the parallel for that is like the villain is like this force of nature, and in the end, he wins.
yeah. So there's no way fighting him. You will lose in the end, just like death is certain.
Mm.
Uh, but yeah, the devil in Blood Meridian is a really well educated man. While in No Country for Old Men, he's like more of a silent force of nature. So if you could say that in No Country for Old Men. It's just nature that kills in the end. Like death just comes for everybody indiscriminately. It's just a matter of chance. While here it's like this really well-spoken person who feels like he can plan and really screw you over if he wanted to, which actually is one of the first things that he does in the book, and God knows why.
Yeah. So it's I don't know how the author is called, from Illuminati, then something.
Dan Brown?
After the yeah, exactly. After the second book, you realize, oh wait, that's the exact same template.
Yeah,
Just yeah,
Dan Brown is known for writing really formulaic, really like simple things. It's not literally it's not really good, but he writes really engaging books. So
indeed,
he's like a good salesman that has a really good pitch from the start. So from the it's a good book if from the first sentence you're basically hooked. So it's like it says something like he didn't know it yet, but this bus ride would lead to murder, and you go like, oh, murder, that's interesting. How does that connect? And then you keep on reading, and then you hope in the end you discover how that bus ride actually would lead to murder, and in the meantime it pulls you in. While this book just starts like, yeah, well, there was this kid, and he was born underneath a meteor shower, and then he went to Texas, and then he met somebody, and then he joined, and I was like, yeah, what's really the hook in this book? What was supposed to pull me in? And because if you listen to like Cavalleria Rusticana, which is an opera that starts with some guy singing behind a curtain how much he adores this woman, and like, okay, he's singing about how much he adores this woman, but he does it behind the curtain, so he's supposed to keep it secret. So there's something going on here. I'm interested. What's happening? And here I don't have that. Here it's just, yeah, you're waiting for stuff to happen, and it happens, and it might have been really shocking and interesting back in the 80s when everything was really um, when the religious right was really Puritan. But nowadays you go like, meh, yeah, well, that's nowadays almost Cartoon Network. So yeah. So the interesting hook for this book is maybe gone. It's from a different age. So
okay,
that's my 50 cents on this.
okay,
Also, you can't like fault an author for falling back onto a formula that worked, or like say altering the formula slightly. Say
Well,
with like Cormac McCarthy is like, this villain that just bulldozes through people's lives and gets off scot free. Yeah.
yeah, it might be something which was really interesting in the 80s because the zeitgeist was different. So if you would compare it nowadays, it would like, yeah, there are villains everywhere. That's a kind of zeitgeist. So there are villains everywhere, and they do evil everywhere, and we have to change everything. And back then it was like, yeah, society is pretty good, but there are these people who go around which are criminals and do bad things.
yeah.
So yeah,
Wasn't sorry to interrupt, but wasn't the 70s and the 80s a big time for serial killers?
yeah, the back. Well, you had a higher sense of trust. Well, maybe it's because I'm from the countryside, but I remember that in the 90s when I was in a somewhat bigger city, they had this newspaper on the local television where they would just show it happening, and then the one rape happened, and you go like nowadays, oh, just one. There was a high level of trust, so I guess it was easier for serial killers, or they were more sensational. So. Yeah, maybe you don't hear of them anymore because we have no time to investigate, so they just remain hidden. So who knows?
Mm.
It must be boring as a serial killer and not never being caught. There's no tension in that.
I don't know. Ask the Unibomber.
You can actually write to him, and
I'll send him a box of chocolate. He'll never know what he'll can expect. So,
out of a wooden box.
yeah, I'll put in one of those old-fashioned alarm clocks that you have to wind up the mechanical ones.
Mm,
Maybe he can use it. I mean, who can't use a good alarm clock, right?
indeed.
I'll pre-wind it for him.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I will go on to the next slide regarding the legacy. I tried to search long and hard, and the only thing I found was it was almost made into a movie, but it was praised to the sky. We will come in a later part of the discussion. But yeah, do you maybe know of something about this, or the legacy regarding this book? Because I don't know none.
I know that Ridley Scott tried to turn it into a movie, and that failed. But I don't know the details. But I guess that Hollywood always is looking for new IP. Might have been interested in this, but I think it's harder to adapt because it's. I mean, what does it give as a story? What kind of characters are there?
It's also like how you could possibly say Tarantino could do it, but the problem with that being Tarantino has a very solid narrative and you can see things being pushed along, whilst with the book it was just a stream of conscious, this happened, this happened, this happened. There's no rhyme or reason, it just occurred.
Yeah, and it also normally in books there's a certain pacing. You know, when there's a certain timeline, but in this book, the timeline is all over. Sometimes a big amount of time is only one sentence they wrote on, or he traveled from there to there. And sometimes it's very in detail, so the time isn't continuously.
You have to rewrite the script, but mainly the thing is that all the violence that happens in this book is something that could translate well to film. There's a lot of descriptions of how things look, and so that translates well. The problem is that making a film with all this violence and then making it commercially viable is hard. There is no equivalent of a movie where you could say, well, okay, that's so violent that it would eclipse a Paul Verhoeven action movie. You know, these things like what's it called, Total Recall, where you have this, where he uses a random bypasser. If Arnold Schwarzenegger just grabs a guy and uses them as a meat shield, and the guy's packed with squibs, so there's blood everywhere. And so that was something back then. Nowadays you don't see that anymore. I mean, if there's even blood, it looks CG, it looks fake. So
I think it's probably because it's just dark. It's just too dark of a tone for any like modern movie. Sure, like I'm going to bring Tarantino again, like you go for about Kill Bill and the amount of blood and gore in that, or even The Hateful Eight, which is like Tarantino's Western film, or Django Unchained, and the amount of violence in that. But it's all comical and very kind of light-hearted. Whilst this, it would just be a little bit too much, too dark.
That and those movies still end on a high note. So I mean, Kill Bill, you have in the end. I don't want to. If people don't want to be spoiled, then too bad. But in the end, you have like Beatrice. So Uma Thurman, she drives away with her daughter. So she has won. She's got her daughter back, and she managed to kill Bill in the end. I can't remember how the Hateful Eight ended, but
almost everybody dead.
Everybody literally dies, but it's on a high note. Like the bad people died.
Inglorious Bastards, they kill Hitler. And then so they still end on a positive note in the end. So even Jackie Brown in the end ends on a positive note. So but here you basically the ending is really dark and ambiguous. It just ends with, okay, the guy who is the untouchable bad guy, that archetype, the devil, is probably the devil. That's okay, because he does things that you would associate with him. I mean, he's both timeless and he seems to be immutable, and he seems to be wanting to talk you into doing really evil things and then blaming you for it. So he never accepts any responsibility for himself.
No, and you can't quite put him down as well. Like there's nothing very definitive about him, be it from like how he's very much, as quoted, a Renaissance man who can put his hand to anything, but at the same time capable of extreme violence. And
he has this one thing that so he's completely bald, and in traditional depictions of the devil in Western literature, or somebody who's in league with that is somebody who has a slight deformity, because man has been created in the image of God. So if the devil would be a regular man, then the devil would have looked like God, or be at least in the image of God, which can't be, of course, because he's the devil. He's the not the antichrist, the anti-force, the antithesis of God himself. So he must have a deformation in order to not be like God. And in this book, it's like that guy is completely bald.
Mm.
So, although yeah, it would be a good moment for bald actors, of course, to stand
You
out
just
again.
you just got to find that 6'7" bald alopecia dude.
Yeah, who can quote Shakespeare or whatever. So they're probably around.
Yeah, somewhere.
Yeah. So on to the summary.
Mhm.
Bishop, this is your turn.
Oh yeah, okay. A kid joins a band of barbers who give permanent involuntary haircuts to people. One of those barbers might be the devil. So, in maybe I should explain that a bit. So you have the kid. So his name is called the kid, and in the end he's called the man. And he's born under a meteor shower, which comes back in the end. And he when he's 14, his mom dies when he's born, and when he's 14 he goes to Texas, and there he sees a preacher, and this preacher is then accused by a judge for fornicating with kids and goats. And so the crowd turns on the judge, and this turns out to be a false accusation. So we're already, this judge is really shifty, and I don't it's actually not explained why he's called the judge, but uh, so he then gets into a bar fight and turns out that he can fight really well. So then he's drafted into the US Army so they can go into a filibuster. And this is not a long rant in Parliament, but actually a filibuster originally was that there was a unauthorized military operation in a foreign country, basically pirate stuff in Mexico and pilfer and take it back. So he goes with this captain. I think his name was Captain White, if I remember correctly.
Indeed.
And they go, and Captain White is an American supremacist, so they go through the desert, which turns out to be a huge mistake, and they get attacked by the Comanche. If I remember correctly, it was the Apache, well, Indians anyway, and so they almost get slaughtered. So he escapes, and he gets rescued by this marauding band that are basically Indian hunters. So they collect the scalps of Indians, and they get money for this. They do this in Mexico. They do this for a while. So initially they're all hailed as heroes because they kill the savages, but everywhere they go, they basically turn everything into ruin. They're like a poison. They destroy bars. They harass women. So when they enter a town, the women want to touch their boots and stuff like that because they're so happy that they're there. And when they leave 3 days later, the streets are deserted, and people are happy that they leave. So this goes on. There's a story about how the judge got to be in the marauding band that scalp. So that's a whole story about making gunpowder in the desert. Then they get onto a boat. Stuff goes wrong. Indians attack. The kid gets an arrow in his leg. He's pursued by the judge. There's a standoff. People get shot. He goes to San Diego. He gets captured. The group gets hung and executed because of all because of all the stuff they did as a band. Because apparently they've been killing a lot. And so he meets a judge a couple of times, and then a couple of years later, when he's like in his middle age, in his 40s, he meets a judge again in a bar. They talk. They go out back. He goes out back to an outhouse. The judge is there, but he's naked. And then the last thing you hear is that people are really aghast of what happened at that outhouse, and the judge is inside and he's dancing. Also, there's a bear. That's about it, I think.
Very
Indeed.
succinct.
I can't really. This book didn't stick with me.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Other books I read, and then it's like, oh yeah, I can basically recall what happened. And here's like I don't know. It's also, it's like stuff happens, but it just doesn't stick in your head because nothing really significantly changes. There's nothing memorable.
Yeah.
It's just all like mayhem.
Yeah, the beginning maybe, but after that it's only raping and pillaging, and then somehow it ends and the book is done.
Yeah,
Mm.
it feels like a first draft of a story. Like, okay, this is good that it's been written, but you need to revise it about 10 times because there's no good story arc. So the amount of violence is there for this to be an interesting book for some, and back in the day, but yeah, I guess the story arc wise, it can really use a couple of iterations. Like you need to there's conflict between the kid and the judge. And I still haven't figured out why the judge basically does this, except for the fact that he's this force of nature and just in the end will just kill everybody. He just picks off everybody one by one for some reason. But there's no like why would he go after the kid? Did the kid sleep with his wife, or because he really tries to screw the kid over, he goes out of his way. But why? I don't know. So I don't know what the question of this book is. Like in Lord of the Rings, you know that the goal is to defeat what's his name, Sauron, and you know that they have to do that by returning the ring into Mount Doom. You know this fairly early from the start of the book, but here you actually don't know. Okay, what's the purpose of the story? It's like you're reading this story and then you go so you're sitting and I'm waiting for a train and somebody's telling you this story and then you go like, okay, why am I listening to this? What's the purpose of this? And it's just like, okay, there are evil men, fine, but nothing. That's my thing. Maybe I completely missed the point in my ignorance, but not a fan.
Yeah, onto that point, the book is very violent.
Yeah.
But it, despite from some actors, the violence is directed in some direction, and it's not well. In the end, it's against anything and anybody. But yeah,
I think it would fit well in nowadays in the fact that that a certain that people of European descent are really violent and evil, and the cause of everything that goes wrong. That would fit really well. So they would say, well, you see this book that is kind of proof of the whole current way to look at each other, because yeah, you see them actively oppressing other people, even though that the other groups are basically trying to kill them as well. So
yeah,
I mean, war is really messy, but as my grandfather said about the Second World War, where two people fight, two people are to blame.
well, yeah. Well, onto the characters. Why I spoke about violence, I thought there's so much violence, and the violence is so persistent. It's almost like a character. It's almost everywhere. So I have put in the definitions per Merriam-Webster: the use of lethal force to harm someone, to damage property, and the second, they need to learn how to. Yeah, this is the example. So yeah. Did you agree with that? That violence is maybe a separate character, or is it just um, force of nature, or random, or somewhat?
I think it's an aspect of man that is there, but it's also an aspect of inside of animals. There might be violent plants, but that might be something different, maybe a different time scale. But it's within everybody the capability of violence, whether this is this physical violence or whether this is psychological terror. It's there, and then given the right circumstance, the right conditions, this will be it will give room to people to express this.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I think with the violence, I think it's just like it just the natural progression for when there is nothing going on, there's no conflict. They kind of need to just resolve that part themselves.
Well, yeah, there might be a conflict in this book, but the conflict itself and its nature and what is resolved is not discussed in this book. So there's no explanation why there is why they have these scalping parties and why there is such a conflict between the natives and and how this because if the violence and that conflict would be a character, then there would be a story arc for it.
Hmm.
You could say it's a character because it doesn't evolve like any other character in this book. They're just all static. So if the violence would be maybe you could describe it as in when he was younger he was really violent, and when he was older he wasn't. But also that's not there.
Perhaps maybe the use of violence is just kind of shedding the light of the truth of what really pushed forth the American West and the creation of the United States as we know it, because it wasn't just, peaceful cohesion of people, economic trade. No, really, the amount of violence necessary to forge a path through
To
the
forge a
West.
nation.
Yeah.
Yeah, but did you get shocked by any? Do you get shocked by the violence, or not at all, or maybe are you desensitized or something like that?
I think it just becomes desensitized. Really, it just becomes everyday part of it. Like various little parts of the book just would stand out because of how they were spoken. It's when the author doesn't take the time to talk at length about the violence and just describes it. It stuck with me a little bit more. Like 2 times. The first time was when one of the scalp hunters took a Native American infant and then beat its head upon stones to kill it. And I was just like, it was just a succinct little sentence. I was like, that stuck with me. And then the second one is when Jackson, the only other black man in the scalp hunting party, he sat by himself because a bartender said that they would allow to serve people of color, but they would have to sit somewhere else. And so Glanton took offense to that and gave the bar owner a gun, to which then Jackson just immediately shot him and carried on with his drink. And then they just kind of moved on afterwards, like it was just a nonchalant thing.
So in the book itself, you got desensitized to the violence.
Yeah, it was just there.
Yeah, you have to take into account that back in '83, this was the early days of, well, not yet the golden age of VHS. So you had these videos like Faces of Death and other video nasties, which was so the amount of gore and violence that you were exposed to on a day-to-day basis was really, really limited. Especially when you compare nowadays to the internet, where you basically can like it's available if you want it, but you also get these movies of people getting into accidents and stuff going wrong. So we're really much more desensitized to this thing than it used to be. I mean, do you remember like a couple of years ago with the refugees from Turkey to Greece? One little boy drowned, and then they posed this boy and took pictures. That's something you would never see in the 80s. That would be to show a picture of a dead kid in a newspaper would be too much.
Yeah.
So it was the age that when you show skinny people from Africa, people just started gathering money because there was a famine, because it's so rare to actually see suffering.
Yeah, but even there, for the first example of the drowned kid, wasn't that he drowned somewhere else even?
Yeah, apparently they didn't find him like that. They posed him like that and then took
Oh yeah,
pictures. It was a horrible thing.
which is even more disgusting.
Well, yeah, there's this whole business where even back then when we got pictures in Africa, they go to the poorest villages and then they find the most wretched kid and then they take pictures. But if they would just turn the camera around, you will see that they're basically in a big city.
Oh,
But
you mean journalism?
Yeah. So that's nothing new. But nowadays you have, back then it would be rare to find somebody with a camera, and taking pictures was expensive. Now, so nowadays you can just if you're filming somewhere for the news, then there's somebody else with a telephone filming you. So it's constantly so there's now more visible what journalists are actually doing.
Yeah.
So.
But to the violence part, now go back to the starving kid. What also is mentioned about, I think the race or aid for Africa is that it was a socialist leader which basically mismanaged the economy and people starved because of that. So yeah, no mention of that as well.
Yeah, because I mean, if
Socialism.
people have money, somebody will manufacture food to sell it to them.
Mm-hmm.
So, might not be the best quality, but surely they wouldn't die of starvation.
Yeah.
You really have to, in a liberal capitalist society, you really have to take some effort to starve. You might as well say, well, I'm not eating any meat anymore, so you basically die because you get not enough vitamin B12. So, like, not mentioning a group of people who do that voluntarily, almost religiously. So.
Yep. And the second part is nowadays the violence. I mean, you're about 3 clicks away from a live beheading video from ISIS, but back then, maybe in the 80s, the violence was more. You maybe you did, but the chance of a normal dude running across a violent video or gore or something was slim to none. So the only violence they could. Yeah, sorry.
Let's say you should have gone abroad and be in a war in order to have seen that,
Yeah,
because
exactly.
there was no. If that material was there, it was very well curated, so it wouldn't be shown on television.
Indeed, that this is what which my point is driving to. The only accounts in this between and despite from war is fictional violence. Maybe you or fictional violence on paper or fiction on whatever ever, but nowadays you can see the violence directly on your phone. But a few years earlier, you had to go somewhere, or you were in a violent conflict. For example, Vietnam, the Second World War, Korea War, or invasion of Iraq, or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, on to the first real character, the kid, or as he is in the last chapter of the book, called the man, because a great span of time has passed. The book basically follows him, or it's not through him that the book is told, but the book basically follows his action. But he isn't really the protagonist, isn't is he?
He, he's basically the anchor to which you are. You see, basically events happen, and you see it through his eyes. So if something is told, which happens somewhere else, it's somebody telling it to him. So he is the point of view character. But to call him the protagonist, usually in a traditional protagonist, you have somebody who follows a story arc. So he has a dilemma in the beginning, he has to overcome something, and then that's the result. That's the classical arc, right? He improves, and he really doesn't improve. The only thing that he does is that he, I think, stands up to the judge a bit, but
And he stacks up scalps.
yeah, but
But
that's just work.
Yeah.
There's no real moral high ground for the kid because he just he goes along with everything that kind of occurs.
Yes, and I think in the book he's never described directly as taking a scalp himself. Or am I mistaken?
Nah, he's not in terms of taking a scalp, but he kills a lot, like essentially a lot. He also gets noted as like a sharpshooter by the priest and the judge and Glenton. So they utilize his skills at killing people.
Yeah, well.
He feels more like I don't mean that in the way that you would try to insult somebody. He feels like a tool, like an instrument that is used by the party. He has a set of skills he can really use, but he doesn't have any innate morals or things that that would define him as a man who takes action and makes choices.
Yeah. So basically, he's a tool for violence.
The tool he's recruited into the army, and I think they recruit him because he can fight well and he has a donkey, and then they recruit him into the gang because of the same reason. So yeah. I don't feel like he's a character at all. He probably could have taken a potted plant with a name tag And if a follow plant was poisonous enough, then people would touch it and would die. Then it would probably be the same effect.
Yeah. Poisoning arrows is a hell of a thing.
Yeah.
Okay, on to the next character. John Glanton. He's the leader of the Scalp Hunter gang. I don't know what to say about him. He's also just there to murder, to pillage through the countryside.
Yeah, I think with Glanton, he's kind of just like the almost equal of the judge, but he's lacking any of that Renaissance man intelligence. But he is able to speak Spanish, which helps them in Mexico. I think the deal with Glanton is, I think the priest said that when he first met the judge and he was with Glanton, they struck up like a dark covenant. So it's just the judge tagged along with Glanton, and Glanton kind of just riled up more and more of this violence, created more of a group to push forth that violence across which the judge participated in. So he was kind of like a tool for the judge to, enact this violence.
Oh, sorry, I completely zoned out. Like, I'm so boring. Not you, the character. It's like, this Glanton. I think his role is to give the party a name.
Apparently, it was based upon the recollections of a real life man called John Glanton, I think.
Yeah, I think he was a Texas Ranger as well.
Yeah, apparently he was the real life inspiration was just as bad as the fictional one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just think with Glanton it's just kind of that addition to this band of scalp hunters who just goes to see how far he can push things, and he is kind of the one that also seeks out the most conflict. Like, he's the one who puts the gun in the bar owner's hands, which causes the death of him. And if somebody looks at him funny, he will start a fight with them, or like as soon as he sees an opportunity to cause violence, he would do so.
But you said he's maybe not the opposite, but a mirror image of the judge. But how is he different than?
Well, it's not in terms of a mirror image, but like an equal, like a peer to him. Because, like I said before, he's not the man of many talents like the judges. He can speak Spanish, but I think he's more of the unadulterated violence, whereby it's always at the surface. It's never calm and under the surface simmering away like the judge, who can walk through and just talk to somebody. Whilst the John Glanton, it's all around him. He has this aura of menace, and whereby people come up to him, and then immediately that menace just comes out immediately to whoever he's speaking to, unless it's the judge or some powerful character in the book.
Okay. Bishop, you have something to add about this character?
Who?
Okay. On to the next character. Louis Todvine. He as well is just a menace to society, to take up a popular phrasing. And he's compared to the other ones, he got a few retributions. He's branded. The letters H and T are on his head, which basically means horse theft. And his ears are cut off, basically meaning he's a thief, or other punishments or smaller punishments. But he's even a lower creature of violence than Glanton. He's just a menace.
Yeah, it's almost weird. All these characters just seem to show like the varying degrees of like sociopath or psychopathy that they all engage in. And like even the Wikipedia thing will say that he's not as violent as the Judge or Glanton, but it's like, yeah, the man's got ears around his necklace. Like, this man goes scalp hunting. He's a violent criminal. He will engage in all these sordid acts, but apparently he's not as bad as the others. So these minuscule varying degrees of evil in each of the party.
Yeah. But I just got thinking maybe there's a mirroring effect. On the one side is the polished side, and on the other the rough. And the polished side of violence is the judge, and on the unpolished side is the deviants, like the kid maybe not, but Clanton and Todvine. They're just raw violence, and the judge is at least a little bit polished up, but they're still basically mirrored of each other because of the violence. I don't know, but yeah.
Yeah. But at the same time, Toadvine did negotiate like a release for himself. I think in like he was in prison and he managed to get him and the kid out. So he has possibly like a way with words despite his appearance and what he's done. And next to Glanton, he's like the lesser evil. So
Yeah, that's a nice way to put it.
Yeah, it's just a bunch of strange characters within this book. They all kind of blend into one another.
Yeah, just one. Yeah, Bishop. Oh yeah, you're distracted. Okay.
No, Toad fine. He's mentioned quite a lot. Oddly, the necklace of ears is something that the kid in the end wears, and then he talks about them. They go like, "Oh, what are these? Are these people of color ears?" And so, no, they're indigenous people ears. And then the people won't believe it because, who would kill so many of them? But apparently, Toadfine managed. So he's wearing those ears as a trophy. And they think they're people of color ears because they turn black, which is apparently a mystery to them. So.
Yeah, well, all kind of messed up. The next character, Benjamin Tobin, or as he's also called, the ex-priest. I could not confirm this, but in the book, or didn't recall that it was mentioned. But he was a novice to the Society of Jesus, basically a Jesuit.
Oh, them the Jesuits, yeah.
Yeah.
Due to many reasons, we can't go into that any further. But yeah, he's probably the most religious person. Everybody treats him like a priest, while he's not one of them. Yeah, in a very, very, very distant part, he kind of reminds me of the Anabaptist from Catch-22, where people call him like a Catholic, and he says, "I'm an Anabaptist," and then nobody listens to him. So as that a bit of that. So yeah, he's kind of maybe the conscience, which itself is really latent. But yeah, he's like, okay, what's an ex-priest doing in a party like that? What happens?
Yeah, he still goes along with all the murdering and whatnot.
And the only time he ever shows any like fearful remorse is whenever the judge speaks to him, or when the judge finally starts to become more antagonistic towards him and he wants to kill him. He kind of starts, threatening the kid, saying, "If you don't kill him, I'll kill you." And so it's just kind of almost like a mask for him for this, being an ex-novitiate of the church, to show he's like got some sort of conscience. But he does go along with all this murder, rape, pillaging, scalping, commending the kid that he's a sharpshooter, taking out people. He's just, probably that human part of the conscious, trying to find a reasoning for why he does these things while still doing them.
Yeah, but still, he's murdering scum like the others. But maybe in the clock of a priest. But he isn't one, so there it goes as well.
Yeah,
it might be that even a person who got into religion might end up being terrible. So it doesn't guarantee that being a religious person will prevent you from doing these evil things.
Yeah.
Indeed. Come on. There we go. On to the maybe main character of the book, Judge Holden. We discussed about or talked about him a little bit early in the presentation. He's a giant, about 6'7", pale, completely hairless. This is maybe due to him being a reincarnation of the devil, as described by Bishop, right?
Hmm.
He's extremely smart, well spoken. As for the example, he makes gunpowder out in the desert, which may or may not work, or at least let's just say the basic recipe is right. And he's extremely, despite him being maybe a gentleman or a Renaissance man, he's maybe even the most violent or most deviant of all the characters in the book.
There's a certain disconnect when he speaks. So there's this scene where the kid is in jail and he's visiting them, and you get the idea that every time they speak, you have the judge who is using really educated language. He's well read, and you've got the idea that this doesn't really arrive at the kid who uses like more common language, more lowbrow language. It ain't. It didn't happen. Well, the judge will. You expect him to quote Shakespeare at any moment. If he would do that, it wouldn't be out of place.
The thing with the judge that I found, I think it's hinted that he's a paedophile in the book, because there's various occasions whereby there's children around him and then vicious things happen to the children. Like one time they spared a Native American child, like a toddler, and the toddler was last seen alive like around the campfire on the judge's knee, and he's just bobbing up and down on his knee. Glanton goes to get something from his horse. He comes around to go back to the campfire, and he finds that the child's neck has been completely snapped by the judge. And I think he pulls a gun on the judge, calling him "you son of a bitch," before deciding to put the gun away. And then there's the other part whereby I think it's like somewhere in the book it said the child was violated before the gang quickly moved on. And then at the end of the book, it mentioned again there was a child that was in the vicinity of when the kid who then goes by the man is killed or something worse has occurred to him. So it's like he is the real incarnation of everything evil and the worst of the worst, despite the appearance and how he talks about himself and how he can speak eloquently amongst this band of barbarians.
It's definitely that he that he presents himself in a different way than he acts. But that's mainly, well, you have this at some point this idiot is or was described as a retard.
Mm-hmm.
He's following the judge everywhere, and that's also really odd. So why would he do this? And then he's described as being naked quite a lot. And then despite being naked, he's still him. He would have been like, sometimes you say the boss is the boss, even if he's there in his swimming trunks. And this is definitely true for the judge. The judge is always himself. He's always the same person. Doesn't matter how he's dressed or in what situation.
Yeah. And the thing with the judge also, speaking about the idiot, I remember this one scene, like the idiot walks into a river after being bathed by, I can't remember, the people waiting for the ferry, and he starts drowning in the middle of the night, and it just happenstance that the judge, bare naked there, is walking by and saves the idiot and carries him out of the water. But then it also starts looking after the idiot, but then as the judge has been turned on by Tobin and the kid, he then has the idiot on a leather leash and walks around trying to find the two of them, almost using him as a scent dog. So it's a weird image, and also a weird thing of showing he saved the idiot in the water.
Yeah, it happens more in the story. The judge just turns up and it's usually not dressed very much, so that's seems to be one of his superpowers.
Yeah, isn't that one point in the book also mentioned that everybody in the crew has seen the judge at one point or another in their career?
Yeah, the main introduction of him is that Tobin and Glanton found the judge just sat on a rock in the middle of nowhere, and just smiling.
Yeah, and he was sitting there, and also the rock was out of place. It's like he brought the rock, put it there, and was sitting on it while he and so he's described as being out of. It doesn't matter where he is. He's kind of out of place, out of sync with everything.
Well, he's maybe an albino and he's a giant and he's hairless, so
Yeah, but despite
you
of that,
will remember him.
the way he acts and the way that he arrives and presents and talks, it's always it never matches with the people around him. He's like always extraordinary.
Yeah, and it's almost like there's a weird Dr. and Jekyll and Mr. Hyde thing going on, because always the weird stuff that's memorable in this book happens in the night. Because at night he starts sketching things by the firelight, but then he starts disrobing until like he's completely naked whilst discussing various things about how the world is to the rest of the gang. It's like, I think one of the most memorable quotes that most people refer to for describing him is like, the judge says, whatever exists, whatever in creation exists without my knowledge exists without my consent. Kind of showing like this like very evil idea that he wants to find out about things, learn things, maybe perhaps into then exploit it or do very evil things towards it.
And he wants to lock everything up in a cage, doesn't he?
Like his idea of a perfect world is everything in a zoo.
Yeah.
Yes, like with the judge, he does feel like very much the main character of the book. Because all the horrific acts and like the darkest parts, and then the philosophical talks at the fireside, all revolve around him. It's like this cult of personality, whereby even though they start talking to each other less and less as worse things happen to the gang, from the Yuma massacre, being lost in the desert, they all seem to coalesce around the judge, who then just walks on silently by as things happen around him.
I was just thinking about maybe finding the judge in the desert on his stone is an allusion to the temptation of Jesus Christ in the desert. But I have not read it, so I cannot tell. Or this book maybe being something like, if you fall for the temptations, what will come along, something to that effect.
Yeah.
Because I don't recall exactly who, but a few get punished in the end, or they get hung in San Francisco or San Diego. So there's a little bit of redemption, but not very much for all, I guess, crimes that they committed, evils.
I think also another thing with the judge, I think it was when he's describing how mankind is the ultimate practitioner of war. So like as we grew up from the primordial ooze, war was just waiting for us, because we were like the best at executing utter extreme violence upon the world, and how he just leans into that almost as if like that's his profession. Regardless if it's Comanche Indians, Americans, Mexicans, anybody.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the Roman god Mars, the god of war. If maybe there's an allusion to that, but
perhaps.
Yeah.
But yeah, he is just that weird, strange force of nature character within the book.
Yeah. Bishop, you're oddly quiet. The last
I was just listening, but well, the point of him being the god of war might be true, as in that he certainly is the catalyst for conflict, and he certainly embodies all the horrors that come with war. So, and he also embodies that thing that people who are well spoken and really nice might also be the worst people if you put them in the right situation. I don't know if you ever read this book, Ordinary Men, which was about the mid-century Germans behind what the police force was doing. And it turned out that while they were trying to, God, how do I say this? To do their job and executing people, they had to do this en masse. It turned out that some people, beforehand you would think, oh, they would be really well at this. They were terrible. They couldn't do it. And there were some people who were really nice and really ordinary. And it turned out that if you just gave them enough liquor, they would just shoot everybody without any remorse. and he kind of has this. He can be really well spoken, and he almost seems like somebody who touches nobility. He uses the words. He has the veneer. Has the presence. But as soon as he's out of sight or put into darkness, then he becomes really cruel. And somehow he does enjoy it. And this undertone of cruelty is something that's in most people.
Yeah, maybe you said about when he strips naked, he shows his true self. He strips naked to his purest essence, and he's the most violent and deviant while he's doing that. But as far as I recall, he never killed somebody naked, so there's still some veneer, maybe.
Yeah.
Oh, he had a howitzer. So
Oh yeah,
Oh yeah,
But then also at the end of the book when he does off with the kid.
It might be that clothes actually symbolize civilization, and then without civilization, without these clothes, you revert to your violent self. You almost animalistic way. So that this would be the exact opposite of what Rousseau would do with the noble savage. So the judge would be a very, very violent man, if it not that he had some trappings of civilization. And even then, he's not nice.
Yeah, and if you want to like paint him as like the monster, this huge, pale, alopecia, hairless monster, and like he will speak eloquently and has the clothes, but then as soon as they come off, it's like the monster was already there. If you looked at just like the base characteristic appearance of him, to judge by appearances.
Yeah, well. And I guess this is the last note about this, but the characters are often called by a name, I guess, or some, for example, the judge or the kid or the ex-priest or the priest. Is somebody as well that they're maybe called by a title, or is that just for convenience?
It's more of a nickname which happens. So you see this also among students.
Mm-hmm.
That they just get a nickname that everybody uses.
Yeah.
To the point that I knew people for like, I think 8 years before I figured out that what their real name was.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that happens.
And so back then, before everything was registered, you had a couple of aliases. So he might not be an official judge, but he might be somebody they start calling him the judge because of the way that it looks. Or it might be that at some point he was elected as a judge in the US, and that's why he holds this title, but you don't know. But it's just something that stuck. It's something that describes. So these are lots of them are just nicknames. So so the kid is probably called the kid because he was the youngest one. It's literally the kid, and that's stuck for a while. You never really, I think, you don't learn his real name. So
yeah, this is why I ask, or if it's a title or is it descriptive or prescriptive.
I think it doesn't matter as long as it works as an identifier.
Okay.
You see a lot with students. You see a lot that they use the surname instead of the first name of somebody.
Oh yeah.
But then you have some people, they have such a common first name and such a common surname that they just get the guy was named after the town that he came from. So that way, yeah, you wouldn't really know. To the point, actually, when I met him a couple of years later, like 10 years later, the company he worked at, they still knew him with a student nickname that stuck so well. And it was really not descriptive at all, except that he came from that town. If you would see him, they're like, yeah, it was nonsensical, but just stuck. So,
okay.
So I think in this case it might actually be descriptive, that because of the way that he talks about people, he really says, yeah, I told him what you did and things like that. So he really has his judgmental personality. And oddly, despite the fact that he says that he told when the kid's in prison that he told that it was all the kid's fault, the kid is just released. I expected him to be hung. So it's
okay.
It's an odd moment in an odd book.
Okay. Well, anything to add about the characters?
Basically, all irredeemable.
Yeah.
But then
deviants.
Yeah, but then it just kind of goes to show like the nuances of how they joined together to do the job at hand of scalp hunting. But then, as the time went on and it became less and less tenable because they built up that reputation, they all started to turn on each other one by one, whereby they would willingly leave those who were wounded in the desert, or say leave some to be hanged and not help them. It was just interesting to see how there was a working relationship there until it started breaking down. And they just kind of started turning on each other until finally the gang just dissolves at the end of the book.
Yeah, I got just thinking about in a bygone era they used deviants or penitentiary battalions, I guess is the English name, where they basically used people that had severe crimes but had some capabilities of doing violence and used them against their enemies and just let them loose with all the
Yeah.
horrors that came from that.
Yeah, and it kind of goes to show, like I think whoever mentioned it before, is like they came into town with all the scalps, and the town greeted them as like heroes. But then as soon as they left, everyone was locked indoors. They were terrified. There was warrants handed out for their arrest because it showed the proof. The thing of like using the most deadly tool has like its drawbacks, being the double-edged sword that it is. Doing away with the Native Americans, but then when that comes back to your doorstep, where's that chaotic destructive energy going to go?
Yeah, they were just a giant how you call it, meat grinder.
Yeah,
meat grinder, and the meat grinder needs to be fed, otherwise you will be fed to it, something like that. I don't know. Okay, on to the critical response and popularity. This is my favorite whenever I try to trot this out. This is the Google Nangram.
The statistics, the eternal statistics.
Yeah. Yeah. Basically peaked about in 2018-ish. So, yeah. And I read a little bit about for, how you call it, book critics and whatnot. And first of all, book critics, if somebody sees this, I doubt it, but if you critique a book, don't just go to the other book that you think that is maybe cited in there and talk about that book. It just F you in the knee. Why? I haven't read the book. I have read another book. Why compare that? Okay. That aside, this book was praised as or compared to Moby Dick, which I do not think it's comparable. What about you?
Well, you can always compare stuff, but
yeah,
let's say I think Moby Dick. I think they compare it because of all the couleur locale, the way that everything is described, how the environment looks, which is something Moby Dick does as well, to maybe a bit too much. But in Moby Dick, it was like entertaining and you would learn something. While here it's like, it feels like it's just one big boring, continuous stream of information about the environment. Oh, they're in another desert, and so yeah, I can see the comparison, but I think this book is way inferior compared to Moby Dick.
Maybe it's the fact that people referred to it as the great American novel as they did Moby Dick. So it was just, as soon as whoever put that moniker on this book, people would then refer to Moby Dick as that and compare that comparison for each other.
If this is the great American novel, I don't have high hopes for other American literature.
Yeah. It was turned one of the best modern novels. I guess it's a okay-ish book. I guess if you search up for the references, it maybe could be better. But yeah.
I just want to go to the point that it was a book.
Yeah, I wouldn't even say it's a bad book, but it's just somewhere in between.
It needs work. That's why. You definitely notice that parts of it have been written in one go, which is maybe better for intensity, because if you write something really intense and you rewrite it, it's like reliving the same experience. It's not as intense, and then that intensity wanes. But at the other hand, you do lose out in the amount of like story structure, which is lacking. You could basically write this book as and then the end. So it's just a series of events that happens. It's somebody in high school writing about their summer. What happened? Like, it's just a really horrific summer.
It's not the summer of love.
Wait, and if I'm looking at that graph correctly, does it say like what the popularity of Blood Meridian peaked in 2018?
Ish, yes.
Yeah.
Maybe
So
because the numbers from are not newer than 2019, so that's maybe because.
It's probably because No Country for Old Men is from 2007.
And also perhaps Red Dead Redemption 2 came out in 2018 as well.
Yeah.
So like the big Rockstar video game, perfectly timed.
Yeah, but most modern people are not reading anyway, so or assume, or at least I assume so.
I never heard of the book until somebody who's not here anymore came up with a suggestion to read it. So
no, I have heard of it before, but in no other context.
Yeah, I heard it as a comparison between Heart Darkness, so kind of just like another book about a dark individual, essentially.
Oh, yeah, this is what I forgot to mention, but the book apparently was influenced by, as you said, Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, Michel Foucault, Madness and Civilization. First of all, everything that is postmodern or French should be discarded, but anyhow, Gustav Flaubert's The Temptation of Saint Anthony. I don't know. Haven't read, and Herman Melville's Moby Dick, which we have done a presentation on as well. So yeah, yeah. I have only 1 out of 4, so I could not tell.
Yeah.
How did you like the book, Falk Tosh?
I actually somewhat liked it. It's a weird one. For as much as disconnected as it was, I was interested because very little was said about certain characters, and I got to know about them a little bit more. And then you kind of built up now this bigger portrait of the judge, and I kind of got interested to see how that was going to conclude or see how it resolved in the book with the kid. And I was also interested in like how the events maybe in the fictional sense of this fictional America or what it was based on, see where how it developed. But overall, I'd say I enjoyed it, but at the same time, it was quite a slog getting through.
Bishop?
For me, it was just basically noise.
Damning review.
I couldn't really. I wasn't really disgusted by it, so it's not the worst book that we actually read. but it's like, yeah, what does it add? Okay, man is bad, war is bad. Okay, no, it's just nothing that I could like when I like in 20 years time when I'm a really old man and I have some tyke on my knee and I'd like, let me tell you about this book and what the message behind it was, and it's a good life lesson. Like now it's like I would classify this as violence porn. So somebody who likes violence and doesn't have access to it, he reads about it, and then he can just close his eyes and sit back and think about what this would look like in the worst possible way. So.
Yeah. No. Yeah. For me, despite what some critics said that it was hard to read through, I read maybe 1/3 of it, and the rest I listened to on audiobook. I know, my shame, but about after the half in the audiobook, just everything melded together. It was just raping and pillaging and whatnot. So there isn't really a distinction, but the first part of the book was quite engaging, very violent, but yeah, that didn't disturb me too much. So yeah. Okay. Yeah. Anything else before we close out?
I can see why it totally hasn't been made into a film or even video game or other form of media, because it's kind of difficult to decipher book without some major alterations of the story to make it a little bit more understandable for, say, the general public.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I think they could turn this into a Apple TV series, and then they would write it from the point of view of the Indians.
Oh no, the bad white man came and killed us all.
New to Netflix.
It would be if I would give my accurate description of the Foundation series on Apple TV, then I think that I would never be allowed on YouTube again. Let's keep it at that. But it's no, it's they probably take it, and they probably take it for the title and the setting, and then it would be like a 15 episode chase of the judge, and then in the end there would be a stand up on the top of a mountain, and then the judge would get away for season 2. Hurting the girl who's been chasing him, the hero of the story, but she survives and heals in one day. I don't know. I shouldn't write or think about modern series. Like I just pine for a good Paul Verhoeven action movie.
Okay. Well, on to the next book we will read will be Wilhelm Tell by Friedrich Schiller, and this will be the 30th of February.
I'm saying Swiss propaganda.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, Friedrich Schiller was a German. Well, yeah.
Wannabe Swiss propaganda.
Wannabe. Yeah, so in 2 weeks' time we will read or present it. So yeah. Any closing remarks? I guess not. So good night, everybody. The book is okay. Yeah, have a good night. Bye-bye.
Bye.